for PowerPoint. All right. We're trying something new. I'm going to try to use my notes and my cell phone tonight for class. So let's see here. I'm going to click next slide. Does it work? It does. All right. Great. Okay. Well, welcome to this quarter's first class of The Chosen. If you remember, we did this 2 quarters ago. Richard and I tag teamed the first season and the first 3 episodes of the second season. And Lord willing, we'll get through the rest of the second and the entirety of the third this quarter. I was going to tell a joke, but now it doesn't seem very pertinent. So let's just keep going. My son wants me to tell a joke. How do you know that My Eyes Are Dry was written by a Southern composer? 1 syllable, ol. You read that, you sing that song, it is ol, not oil, it's ol. So it was written by a Southern composer. Okay. What's that? Oh, hey, take them where you can get them. Okay, so just as a reminder, we're going through The Chosen on Wednesday nights. If you weren't here last Wednesday night, you might out a little bit, but we'll do a quick review. The purpose of this, Richard and I are teaching it, tag teaming it together, and we both have different skills. Richard's coming with lessons that are very life applicable. My lessons are more analytical, and we're going to look at the content, and we're both teaching to our strengths. Neither good nor bad, we're just teaching to our strengths. I want to remind you that the way I want to look at The Chosen is if you were to go bring a friend or family member into your home and show them The Chosen, I want you to be able to be confident to say, here's The Chosen. After you watch it, go to the Bible and say, hey, this is what the Bible says about what we just watched. Oh, by the way, this extra stuff is not what the Bible says. I want you to be able to speak with authority about what you just showed your friends, your family members, or what we just watched on Wednesday night. Keep in mind that I think I've said this before, we should be building faith on the foundation that is the gospel, the cornerstone that is Jesus Christ. And it's great that we have this kind of media to be able to enjoy and to enrich our faith and to encourage us, but it is not the cornerstone. It is not the foundation. It's just something nice, right? If I unbutton my shirt a little bit, you'll see I've got a Star Wars shirt underneath here. I love Star Wars. It's not my faith. I enjoy watching it. I enjoy reading about it. My sons and I have lightsabers, but it's not something I build my faith on. And I think it should be the same thing here with The Chosen. Okay? There are aspects of The Chosen that we can build our faith on. And there's aspects of The Chosen that were made by man that we might consider are additions to his gospel, to God's gospel. All right. So just an intro and recap. So we're going to talk about The Chosen. The episode title for last Wednesday was The Perfect Opportunity. That's not episode 8. It's supposed to be episode 4. Boy. Who made these slides? Okay, so for those that watched it, what was memorable to you? And Coleman, Cousins, you guys got mics, it's your turn to shine. What was memorable to you about Wednesday night's episode? Don's got a comment up here, Avery.
Can you hear me?
Now. Here you go.
There were actually 2. The first one when the brothers were reunited, and the younger one's, I've got a job to do, and he starts off, and his brother tells him, when you see me on my feet, you will know the Messiah has come. Mm. And things kind of go on from there.
Just head downhill from there, right?
Nope, not downhill.
Well, okay.
Because he sees him on his, he finally sees him on his feet.
Right.
And he forgets why he was there, the younger brother.
That was the first one. What's the second one?
The second one was right at the end when, Jesus finally comes to the man. He's been trying to get into the pool, and he can't because nobody will help him. As they're leaving the city, one of his disciples asked him, Jesus, why did you heal this man on the Sabbath.
Right.
And he says, there are times when you just have to stir the water.
Yeah. And then fade to black and episode over. Yes, sir. John.
Yeah, I also had two. It's very powerful to see Jesus, going to Jerusalem and seeing the other people being crucified outside the city.
Yeah.
And it seems entirely plausible that could have been something that he saw going to Jerusalem. But that's very powerful. He knows the cross is coming up. And then, back to the end, stirring up the water. I love the concept and the idea. We don't know that Simon the Zealot's related to this man. Obviously, you'll get into that. But I love the idea that Jesus and God has a knowledge that surpasses ours and knows about that perfect timing, that perfect opportunity. So that's very powerful.
Lauren's got a comment right here.
To be honest, I agree with both John and him over there because, like he said, sometimes you got to stir water. But here's the reason why. He did it in a justifiable way. And, of course, if he's got to prove he's the Messiah, he's got to break certain rules, and he knows when the right time to break those rules. But there's one thing we all learn in life. Choices have consequences. And in the end, Jesus was crucified, and the Pharisees, they made a bad choice by crucifying him, and their choices had consequences, and we all see that in the Bible, of course. And
Did you guys notice when I think the Pharisee comes up and says, "Who told you to pick up your mat?" Matthew's like, "Where's that written in the Torah?" And John's like, "It's not in the Torah, it's in the oral tradition," right? So is Jesus violating the Torah? No. Is he violating the set of rules that the Pharisees made in order to codify what's in the Torah? Yes. So, all right. Anything else? All right, let's go through and just summarize for those that weren't here what we saw. All right, so it started off, we saw a young boy. Jerry, could you move the mouse pointer to the side someplace? There you go. Not that far side, but just click on it, I think, or John. Okay, so it starts with a young boy climbing a tree. I've climbed a tree before. How many young boys have fallen out of trees? I've fallen out of trees. Anybody fallen out of a tree? Yeah. It doesn't end well for this young man. It's implied. We've got about 9 minutes of content here that, one, appear nowhere in the Bible, and two, have no expository whatsoever. It is just visual storytelling for the next 9 minutes, okay? And so we have to assume what's happening. We see this boy, he falls. We realize he's paralyzed. We see the father taking the son to what looks like a witch doctor or a healer. Does that work? No. We see the younger brother engaging now an older brother in some festivals and making sure he's not set apart and outside the crowd. He's actually including his older brother. We see them as they grow up, and we see them, fist bumps. I give all my nephews fist bumps, and these two brothers gave fist bumps in the show. And then we get to a point where it looks like the younger brother's being radicalized. He's left, and he leaves a note on the bed for his older brother. And this note comes up later in the show. And then we fast forward a little bit, and we see the early days at the pool. As a young man, we see the paralyzed boy, at the pool, and it's starting to make sense, right? Up at this point, I didn't know we were dealing with the healing at the pool of Bethesda. Bethesda. Sorry, Bethesda is a video game company. Bethesda. So the healing at the pool of Bethesda. But once you see those waters turned up, you kind of know, hey, where are we at? From there, we're taken to the other brother, and we see him training and fighting and doing some sort of graduation, right? He's passed some rite, he's given some knife, and we come to the conclusion that this is a zealot. We don't know Simon yet, but we know he's left Jerusalem, he's gone into the mountains, and he's training for something important. He's a zealot at this point, or at least training to become a zealot. Zealots are, think of them like a political party. Anybody want to give me a quick summary of what zealots are? What's that? Terrorists. So we got terrorists from Hudson. Dave, did you raise your hand? Did you? Be careful. Radical Jews. Okay, so these zealots' intention was to, one, they had a righteous intention. Okay? If you went through Charles's class between the Testaments, the Maccabees might be considered zealots. They are people that want to kick out the foreigners from Jerusalem. They want to return Jerusalem to its former glory, get back to the temple. But these are more in modern times, or in Jesus' times, right, considered zealots. And so this is Simon the Zealot. Then we get practice makes perfect. They try out their plan. It looks great. Everyone's excited. And we don't know this is, we think this is the real world when we first watch it, but then we realize, hey, this is all practice. He gets that knife in the throat. He says, there can only be one God. He lets go of that knife, and everyone claps, and you're really confused, like, what's going on? But you realize this is a cell of individuals that are practicing for an assassination. What's interesting is we actually see a protagonist sitting off in the distance. That's Atticus the Roman. We see in this first 9 minutes of very little exposition, he's introduced as well, but we don't know it's Atticus just yet. But we've got someone spying in, and this is the Roman who we'll see later. Then we go to preparing the booth. We see the followers of Jesus and Jesus himself preparing a booth for the Festival of the Tabernacle. Well, the Festival of the Tabernacle is the Festival of the Booth. Now, the Festival of the Booth is supposed to happen sometime in the last week of September, and ends around the first week of October, Sabbath to Sabbath. So what time did the party start? Sundown Friday night. So sundown Friday night, everyone starts the party, okay? And it starts with a meal. And so, could they build the booth on Sabbath? No, because that would be considered work. So before Sabbath, they are preparing the booth, they're putting it all up, because they're going to spend the next week in this habitation remembering what it was like to wander the desert, as the Israelites did. Okay? Now it's important, Sabbath to Sabbath. The show considers this Sabbath, the second Sabbath, the end of the festival, to be the Sabbath in which the healing at Bethsaida occurs. And that's a pretty good guess. Most scholars typically agree. Does the Bible come out and say they went to Jerusalem for the temple for the Feast of the Booths? No. In John 5, it actually says they went to Jerusalem to observe a feast, and when you look at chronologically, we have high confidence that the feast they went to was the Feast of the Booths. Okay? So, Feast of the Booths, they're making the conclusion that it happened on the final Sabbath. It could have happened on the first Sabbath, but we think one of these 2 days, the healing at Bethsaida happened. It's going to happen all night. I'm going to say that, say that. Bethesda as well? Bethesda? Okay, cool. All right, receiving a job. So then we fast forward back to the younger brother. He's receiving a job. He's going to find out he's going to kill a Roman leader. And then we meet Shmuel, our favorite Pharisee. All right, this guy is, hopefully he doesn't do any more religious movies, because he's going to be hated by the time this series is over. This guy is turning out just like a jerk. Right? He is embodying the Pharisees of the time. And so we find out remember in the previous season, he was in Capernaum, and he identified Jesus as a false prophet, and he told Nicodemus, and this is in the story, not in the Bible, in the show, not the Bible, that, hey, I'm going to go to Jerusalem, and I'm going to look up this new topic I'm really interested in, and it's false prophets. And we see this promise kind of imbued in the next season, where he's actually now in Jerusalem. He's in a place, and we see him later giving an oratory about false prophets. Then we get back to present day Jesse. He is much older, much grayer, much dirtier, and he's still not getting into the pool. We see Simon, What's interesting is in the episode, Simon walks past what we assume is the sheep gate, or one of the gates in Jerusalem, and he sees the men crucified. He asks them, hey, why were those men crucified? And the Roman soldier says, oh, for murder. And so there's a little bit of foreshadowing here that if I go through this murder, I'm going to end up like these men on the cross. Is that biblical? No. Is it a good story? Yeah. Then we get back to the apostles encounter Shmuel, and we have Nathaniel, who we met last episode, who we met a quarter ago. That was the last episode we looked at, was the origin story of Nathaniel. Now, what's nice, Nathaniel actually has an origin story in the gospel. He was sitting under the fig tree. Jesus says, I saw you under the fig tree, and he's called to be an apostle. Simon the Zealot appears 4 times in the Gospels, all in lists of apostles. We don't have a single origin story for Simon the Zealot. And so there's nothing to contradict the story that the chosen director, the chosen writers have put forward. I'll leave you with that. All right? Nothing to contradict what we saw. Also, nothing to support it. But and then these 2 apostles, Nathaniel and Thomas, see Shmuel. There's an interesting comedic sort of interplay between Matthew and Thomas about how they're both like calculating numbers. And yeah. From there, we go into a montage where we have a 2-part montage. One part is Simon and the men in Jerusalem preparing their plan, getting the cart together, getting the knives, preparing their costumes, getting everything ready. And on the other side, we see the tabernacle being built. Okay, and then we end that montage with the tabernacle being built, and we have a teachable moment where they're talking about Zechariah. Do you remember what was mentioned there? Anybody remember? At this feast, yeah, in Zechariah, the 14th chapter, I think it's the 14th chapter, they talk about how the enemies of Jerusalem will come and eat with us at the Feast of the Tabernacles. And that is confounding and confusing for the apostles. Right? They don't quite understand how that's going to happen. And does Jesus answer their question? Not really, which I appreciate because, once again, not in the Bible. But still, it's consider that happening, right? These are men that probably know the Torah, know the Old Testament, not just the Torah, or the Pentateuch and the Torah. That would be a pertinent question. You're in the Feast of Booths with Jesus. You've seen this man heal people. He speaks with authority. Man, if anyone's going to answer my question about, this verse in Zechariah, it's going to be Jesus. How many times have we thought, hey, this is the question I'm going to ask Jesus when I get to heaven? This is their moment to ask those questions. They don't have to wait to heaven. They've got the Son of God right there at their table, and they're asking him. So I don't think that's too far of a stretch. Okay, from there, they're on their way into town. Jesus says he's got someone to meet. The apostles don't know yet that it's the man at the pool of Bethesda. The brothers meet, and there's an interesting interplay there. And then the brother actually reads a passage that we'll go into a little bit before or later. And then we get to Jesus. They see the pool. And once again, I've taken a picture here of Jesus kissing the man. But Jesus in the Gospels doesn't touch the man. Asks him if he wants to be healed. The man says, no one here is going to help me get into the water. And he says, get up your mat and walk. And he does so. Okay, it's interesting. This happens in the Gospel of John. Think about the beginnings of the Gospel of John. What is Jesus equated to? What is that, Don? The Word, right? And we see multiple times in the Gospel of John, Jesus doing things just with his words. Okay, so it makes sense that we're going to see that here in this example, that Jesus doesn't touch the man. Jesus doesn't spit on any mud and rub it on his legs. Right? He's done those things before in the past. What he does is tell the man, get up and walk. And just the words are all is required for Jesus to heal the man. And then it's Shabbat. We've got a Pharisee. We've kind of seen this guy before. We don't know his name, or at least his name's not memorable because I don't know it. And he's like, what are you doing? Why are you picking it up? We have the exchange between Matthew and John, And the Pharisee, Matthew says, well, that's not in the Torah. And John says, well, of course it's not. It's in the oral tradition. And what is the lame man's answer? Oh, I'm sorry, let me put the mat back down, I'll go lay back down on it. That man just healed me. He told me to get up and walk. I'm going to go do that, right? And then from there, we have a change of plans. We actually go through the whole practice, and we see Simon seeing his brother. And then that final scene, he's here to stir up the waters. It's good story, but it's not good Bible. And that's what kind of frustrated me. We ended the entire episode, a really strong, powerful episode, with what I felt like was a very, I'm sorry, Don, you loved it, but it felt gimmicky. It felt kind of gimmicky. So, all right. All right, so what did you like? Now that we kind of refreshed our memory, what did you like? Yes, Anita.
It really isn't what I like, but what I thought about that scene was this was a pagan pool.
Mm-hmm.
There were the poor and the disabled and the ill, and yet there's a group of Pharisees standing there.
It's a little convenient. But we do know in the Bible, as soon as he's healed, there are Pharisees there that call out, why are you doing this on the Sabbath? So at least it's biblical. Yes. Yeah, over here. Brother Bob.
I like the contrast between doing what's right and doing what's legal.
Doing what's right and doing what's legal. Okay. Yeah. Blake?
Just, again, talk about the Bible of it all and whatnot, but I just like being able to have a visual representation of what it might have been for Jesus to heal someone and be personal with someone. Again, we could talk about the Bible-ness of it all, but just to be able to see what an interaction like that might have been with the emotion and the meaning and all that, I think it's really cool.
Yeah. That's why I chose this picture for the what do you like. The actor here is happy and smiling, and I imagine Jesus is healing people, doing something that's never been done in the 400 years through the intertestamental period. There's been no prophets, there's been no healing, there's been no one representing God in Jerusalem. And here comes Jesus, and he gets to do all of these things. Wouldn't you be happy if you could give sight to the blind and healing to the lame? And so to see a smile like that on someone's face, knowing, hey, I'm going to change your life, I really like that. I agree with you, Blake. Okay, yes.
I know it's not biblical, but it makes you want to read the Bible and check.
Yeah, totally does. It totally does. All right. So where in the Bible did this episode come from? Anyone know? I've already kind of said it. John chapter 5, that's correct. So let's read that real quick. Also turn in your Bibles to John chapter 5. We'll look at it a little bit more. Here's what it says. John chapter 5, 2 through 9. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethsaida, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been invalid for 38 years. Okay? To me, that's the hook that almost the entire story is hung on. How did this man who's been at the pool for 38 years become lame, and what has he gone through? Okay? And I think they did a really good job of filling in that 38-year gap. Okay? That's what he's gone through. How would you feel if you had been lame for 38 years and you ended up at this pool with every other person who was blind and lame, paralyzed? And that's what the show have helped us to understand. All right, continue on. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked them, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was the Sabbath. So going back to chapter 5, you look at verse 1. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Okay? We know they're there for a feast. You look at chronologically, we feel really confident it's going to be the Feast of Tabernacles or the Feast of Booths. And then the end of verse 10. Verse 9 actually is not a complete sentence. Continue on in verse 10. And so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick up and walk?" And the man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Okay? That's great. If you look on later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "I'm not going to ruin the next episode for you. Just stop right there." All right. So that's where it came from. And even when you go outside the bounds of that, there's still, making good educated guesses about what festival they're at. We do have to find some way for the Pharisees, some Jews, some place to speak up and challenge the fact that healing was on the Sabbath, and they've done that as well. Okay. So Old Testament context. This verse was listed a couple times in the episode, specifically in the relationship between Simon and his brother, who is the lame man, who, once again, there is no reference for that in the Bible anywhere. That's story. But this is the verse in Zephaniah that's actually referenced in the letter, and then there's a scene in the movie or in the show when Simon is standing, what we assume is on the steps of the temple, and there's a high priest reading from a scroll, and he reads from the book of Zephaniah, and this is what he reads. "The Lord your God is in your midst, a mighty one who will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you by his love. He will exalt over you with loud singing. I will gather those of you who mourn for the festival so that you will no longer suffer reproach. Behold, at that time, I will deal with all your oppressors." That sounds pretty good for Simon, right? "And I will save the lame and gather the outcasts. I will change their shame into praise and renown in all the earth." And that's the passage that is read on the temple steps. That's the same passage that Simon writes in that letter and gives to his brother when they are young men in the story. And then that's the passage that he reads again to his brother as they're men standing near the pool of Bethesda, both, whatever. All right. Next slide. So what about this episode is true according to the gospel? And what do we question? We kind of already talked about it. Jesus healed a paralyzed person on the Sabbath. John? Anything else?
I thought something that was interesting 2 slides back when you were talking about the verse from John. I'm not sure which translation this is, but in the ESV, 5:6 says, "When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long time." And I was looking up the words, right? It could be that he learned that or that he already knew that. And I just think it's kind of representative of how they make some of these decisions. Because when they set this up, Jesus did know that. He came to him and said, "This one's been here the longest."
Yeah. Good point. Yes, Dave.
I think, too, as we want to, the last year part of your question was, what do we question?
Right.
The show kind of makes believe that Jesus knew that he was going there, and they basically said, I have to go meet someone. And of course, there's nowhere in the Bible that tells us that Jesus went there just for that purpose, even though it turned out to be for a purpose.
Yeah.
But I thought that, again, it's the liberty that they have taken with, the story, and then trying to make the story more believable, I guess.
Right. Is Jesus knowing that the man is at the pool, or Jesus discovering the man is at the pool, more important than Jesus healing the man at the pool? And I think it's Jesus healing the man at the pool that ends up being the important thing. Yeah, Clint? And then we've got Nolan had a question too. Avery, do you want to get a microphone to Nolan?
Well, I don't know, this might go with a different slide, but the idea, like I said, I don't know if this is about what it's true or not, but when Simon sees the people on the cross, his reaction, to me, it looked like you can almost see him thinking, this is why I hate the Romans. It was this kind of reinforces why he's there to do what he's doing.
Yeah.
When Jesus sees it, it's a completely different perception.
The preferred method of punishment in Jerusalem is?
Crucifixion.
No.
Oh, yeah, stoning. Yeah,
Stoning.
sure.
Man, everybody gets stoned in Jerusalem. Children get stoned in Jerusalem, right? The preferred method for punishment in Rome? Crucifixion. Yeah. Nolan?
I thought it was funny when he was at the pool, he had healed the guy, and he started to walk away from the pool.
Yeah.
He said, sometimes you have to stir the water. And when he turned around and kept walking, it looked like he was starting to smile, even like thinking between the lines here.
Yeah.
Let him think about that one.
Yeah. True. All right. So like I said, Simon's mentioned 4 times in the Bible. We're hanging a lot on the word zealot. Okay? A whole lot on the word zealot. I think what's interesting that we have to consider about Simon the Zealot, the character, is one, Simon is to the New Testament what Chris is to the Marvel Universe. There's Chris Pratt, Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth. There's Chris's everywhere. And in the New Testament, there's Simons everywhere. And most of the Simons get a second first name, Simon Peter, or a title like Simon the brother of Jesus. This guy gets Simon the Zealot. So what if we called Mary the harlot? And she maintained that title throughout the entire gospel. She didn't maintain that title throughout the entire gospel. What if it was Matthew, that dirty tax guy? He didn't maintain that title. But for some reason, Simon maintains that title throughout the entire gospels. Do we know why? No. Is that a question I'm going to ask Simon when I get to heaven? Sure is. But for some reason, he maintains that title, and it's really important. And then the Feast of Tabernacles, like we said, was Shabbat to Shabbat. And so while it's not explicit, I feel like there are things about what we saw that we can imply with a significant degree of confidence that, yes, this did happen during the Feast of the Booths. All right. Source verse. Okay, and then back to the source verse. We already kind of talked about it. Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." We saw before in season 1 the episode where Jesus touched the man on the road and healed him of his leprosy. Okay, we saw it in the episode, and we read it in the gospel. The gospel says he touched the man. John, though, is going to say he told him to get up and walk. We see that elsewhere. Jesus using his words. And John emphasizes the power of Jesus' words. And this is one of those points in time where John emphasizes that Jesus has the power to just use his words. That's how powerful he is. Okay? It has nothing to do with his body being special or different than men's. It has to do with the authority that he has from God, that even his words are powerful. Okay? Think about Genesis. God spoke everything into existence. If this man is God's son, he's going to speak these realities into existence as well. All right. So, Some New Testament context. This is from the Sermon on the Mount, which we'll actually get to in The Chosen. We haven't gotten to it yet, but this is one that I think is important when we consider just the big picture of what we watched. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled, Matthew 5:6. The zealots were righteous. They had good intentions. They wanted to see their people restored, their faith restored, their temple restored. They wanted to kick out the Romans. They had good intentions. And we know Jesus is transformative from our own personal experiences, right? We also know he's transformative from Paul's experiences and Peter's experiences. Paul on the road to Damascus is transformed literally in a blink from a seeing man to a blind man, and then in the next few days from an unbeliever to a baptized believer who goes on to spread the gospel message throughout Asia. It's safe to assume that Jesus was transformative for Simon the Zealot as an apostle. What's unfortunate is we don't know how much Simon's life changed. But we do know this man was chosen, handpicked by Jesus to follow in his ministry. And we do know that he continues on outside the gospel, continuing to minister and continuing to preach and ultimately being martyred. Having his desires and pursuits reordered and transformed, the result of Simon was a contentment, hopefully, that wasn't found on earth. A contentment that couldn't be provided by a political party, couldn't be provided by money, couldn't be provided in relationships, couldn't be provided in accomplishments, accolades, and number of Facebook friends or Instagram followers, and not in health and in long life. Ultimately, what I think drew Simon the Zealot away from his political leanings and into following Jesus was Jesus. And that's the only thing that we can say for certain. And so tonight, as you think about your own life and you think about your interaction with Jesus through reading in his Gospels, through the Bible study we have under this roof, how is it going to continue to transform your life? And if you're interested about that transformation and you want to learn more, you can always come forward as we stand and sing.